Rich, but I came from the Nile Valley. It's bittersweet, I smile sadly. Truth rarely seen like child's daddies. I'm in Hotep, I style flashy. Regarded highly, I'm Selassie. As time is passing, tribes are clashing. I know the ledge, I grow my dreads. My queen's two open legs have golden eggs, I'm hatched. 9 months had to hold my breath. Now I dream so heavy that I broke the bed. Provoke the feds that slaughter the sons. 12 get the 4-5 like a quarter to 1. The war has begun. Latin for sun, the soul and melanites get more of the sun. We the fortunate ones. Got the God in the womb and the Lord in my come, and no more means love. Death is the source that I'm from. Everything that they do, we have already done. Self-taught, my ice a melt salt. Mine high price, I write and sell thought. I felt cloth.
Peace, family. Welcome to another episode, Underground Railroad Productions. I am with the legend himself, man, Baba Ashra Kwesi. Welcome back to the show, brother.
Honored to be back on your show, Brother Rich.
Yes, indeed, man.
Liberated.
Indeed, brother. You've been doing it for quite some time. You are coming to New York once again, brother. It's going to be an awesome event, December 10th. Let me just give the people the information real quick. Baba Ashra Kwesi will be speaking on the African spiritual science of the so-called Christmas holiday. It will be at the Black Lady Theater in Brooklyn on 750 Nostrand Avenue. And for more information, you can contact the brother King Simon at 347-496-1022. Brother, a lot of people are talking about your return to NYC, and everybody's looking forward to it. Could you let the people know what can they expect December 10th, brother?
Oh, well, thank you, Brother Rich. Was always honored to come back to New York for another communiversity. I always like to say with Bobby Wright, communiversity, that's what this is. Education for liberation, and we control the syllabus. And this is a very important time of this year because it's the winter solstice, and many things that we see out here now. It's almost like Las Vegas out there with whistles and tweets and all about white idolatry and worshiping white images, and still taught to us that the Holy Mother, which is looked at as a European image, when in fact this is a corruption of ancient African spiritual stories documented on the books in stone that I have now documented for over 37 years, and peace be upon him. Our Grand Master Teacher, Dr. Yosef Yakin, that we know as affectionately as Dr. Ben, 14 years apprenticeship under him. And there I was able to document, which he talked about for many years. When I first met him, he said, I can take you back and show you on the temples and tombs where our ancestors told these stories for thousands of years of Western civilization, and even Western religion was taken from the ancient African spiritual stories documented right there in stone. So I come with visual documentation because, the majority of our people are Christians and believe in a European Western version of it. As I said, we're caught in the white idolatry, and this is the epitome of white supremacy right now, when we see that many of the spiritual stories that are told that are based off of stellar events, meaning the stars, but based off of the solar event, meaning the sun. This is all based off of the birth of the sun that our ancestors personified as a Ru who was born of a holy birth. When we look at the Madonna and Child, we can see with that carved in stone, we can see the Black Madonna. We can see a Set, who the Greeks referred to as Isis, when the Greeks and the Romans eventually came in and took these ideas and carried it to the Western world. And this is how we see it now. Unfortunately, it's looked at as white images and documentation. And these are some of the things we're going to look at. What is the star all about in the East? Okay, did our ancestors document that on the books in stone? We're going to look at that. What is the idea of the angel or the gable of the Lord appearing to Mary in the back room? Was that not copied from the temples of ancient Kemet? It was not Gabriel, it was Tahuti who appeared to a Set. Says she's going to have a holy child. These stories are up and down the now. And right now, as many of our people are caught up in the Black Friday and cyber space to keep us with things to do so we don't have time to think. But it's now time for the final emancipation of our mind, and that is going back to our own spirituality to show where these stories came from. And as long as our people are not afraid to think about these stories, not to have a belief system, to where the dogma of the Western religion have taught us to believe in everything but not to think about it. But once we have this critical analytical analysis and coming with this presentation, Brother Rich, then we can see without question that like we are stolen people from Africa, so that also the spiritual stories, also were stolen. So this time of the year is very critical, in terms of understanding what this really means. And again, like I said, I will be showing this and documenting it from over 3 decades right there on the temples and tombs, where clearly we can see where these spiritual ideas were literally taken from African people and incorporated into the Western world. And even though the images are, black images are demonized and vilified, but still the worship of the Black Madonna is throughout Europe, because the Romans took the Set, who the Greeks call Isis, to the Western world, to the Germanic tribes, to Gaul. And the presence of the Black Madonna in Europe to this very day is based off of the spiritual mother, the original, the prototype of the Holy Mother, Set, which was corrupted into Mary. And even when we look at the name Mary, that's a Medu-Neter name of Murray, that means love. So the very name of Mary was taken from the beliefs, taken from the that our ancestors referred to as Murray, that became Mary. What is the idea of the cow? Why is the cow in the manger? You know, every time we associate with Kemet with animals, they call it animal worship, but nobody questions the animals when we see it in pictorial pictures in Western art, when in fact that is a corruption of ancient Kemet. So these are some of the things we're going to look at, brother, and a lot more, to evoke an ancestral genetic memory bank that's been lying dormant. And that's what we mean by the ancient African spiritual science that we're going to look at and incorporate it into the European holidays. And it's all about the liberation of our mind. And for us to be a people, again, we can't continue to worship white idolatry or worship white images and expect to be free. This is when the enemy becomes the deity and the spiritual subconscious of our mind. And again, once we're able to see where these things were stolen, then, of course, we can get out of the Serapis Jesus worship. Yes, I say Serapis Jesus worship because this is what they pretty much created at these ecumenical conferences, and some of these are some of the things we're going to look at, Brother Rich.
Cool, man. I mean, that sounds amazing, brother. You've been doing it for quite some time. A lot of information I see on the internet that people are talking about these days, I remember you talking about decades ago. So I definitely appreciate.
You got the internet now. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Well, you got the internet now, where people can see the information, and yes, talking about it for many years, but not only talking about it, but showing it.
Documented, yeah.
Documented from the field and the research and from the books in stone. And every year I'm always finding something, a relief, as though the ancestors are calling me over from one relief to another relief. And, I mean, literally, it's mind-blowing even to me. I went over it after I find something and do the comparative analysis to show that the dogma of Western Christianity and the belief system that they have actually brainwashed our people into believing these things, the angelical realm, as Dr. Clark, peace be upon him, who, by the way, I met in Egypt in 1981. So sitting at the feet of these two grandmaster teachers, Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark, was an awesome experience that helped me in my growth and who I am today. But as Dr. Clark said, they literally colonized the afterlife. So when you think of our people who look at the angelical realm as a white heaven, a white God, white angels, and so forth. So again, once we're able to put the books in stone that I refer as, because that's what the temples are. The temples are literally books in stone. And there we can see clearly where these ideas came from. The Western Europeans can only show you the art, but they can't show you the historical facts of where they're getting these stories. But when we look at the temples of Kemet, we can see without question that these things were copied and corrupted. And I think that this time of the year is the most important time of the year because we can see these things. We can see what it really represents. And so people don't want to get caught up in the gross national product, okay, to help to pick up the economy. If they want to come out and think, at least save some money, because now people are spending everything they got just trying to buy that gift. And that's what it's all about now, is the brainwashing our people to run out there. So these are some of the things we're going to look at. And even looking at the paganism of Europe and how they created certain images and what this Santa Claus image is really all about. And how the images came out of the Germanic tribes and came out of the Romans and Saturnalia. And some of these things we're going to look at. Because once our people are able to see these things, that we don't get caught up in the worship of these things. And above all, we can start to look through the matrix of white supremacy. So again, our diameter and our thinking has been locked within thinking within this 2,000 years. But all this is a corruption of ancient African spirituality. And these are the things that we're going to look at. So it's going to be a great inspiration. If people are not afraid to think about these things, then they can come out and see this and not get caught up in a belief system. As I said, the worst form of enslavement that we're in right now, Brother Rich, is spiritual enslavement. And spiritual enslavement is when the enemy becomes the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. And this is where we are today. I mean, here, here in Dallas, and just like, I don't know if you have a lot of yards back there in New York, but in many places around the country, black people are getting plastic white babies out of their closets and putting in the yard, and a white male and female, and calling it the Holy Family. I mean, this is sad, brother. You know, that we are in this day still in this type of white idolatry, that we would put these things in our yard. But if we understand the African spiritual stories that were taken from the original idea of the holy birth that was started by our people and our ancestors on the banks of the Nile, the Kemetic Africans in the Nile Valley, then we would not find ourselves 20 years from now, or 50 years from now, 100 years from now, still taking white plastic babies and putting in our yard and telling our children that that's the Son of God. This is a shame. This is what spiritual enslavement does. This is what white idolatry is. This is what the worship of white images is. But I'm not going to just talk about these things. I'm going to show without question that this is all about thievery from the ancient temples and monuments. That's why Kemet is referred to as Egypt today. Got to be somewhere else. It can't be on the African continent. It's got to be looked at as extraterrestrials and all these kind of madness and everything. Once we go back to the original Taneta land, and that's what that is, the original Taneta land, holy land, where everybody from the biblical account, even though in some cases you don't have historical facts, okay, to give proof to that, but everybody's coming into Egypt. The Greeks are coming into Egypt, okay? The earliest Bibles, Western Bibles, were written where? Like the Septuagint in 250 BC, written in Egypt, Alexandria, Egypt. Why? Because they were plundering the temples. And this is what is the making of the Western version of Christianity and the ideas that we see at this time of this winter solstice, and how our ancestors documented these spiritual stories that were personified as heroes and sheroes, especially dealing with the Holy Mother Aset, who was the original Theotokos. When we look at the Western church and the architecture, even the Western church is a copy directly from the architectural structures that you see in ancient Kemet, the temples there. The oblong shape of the church, and when we look at the oblong temples and the pylons, and these are things we're going to look at in the spiritual science that's all behind us. So it's going to be a great time that we're going to have at the Black Sisters Theater. Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, Black Lady Theater.
Isn't that beautiful? The Black Lady Theater, and we're coming with the Black Mother. So, the Holy Birth.
Wait, you know, there's something I got to ask you. A very popular topic today. And I know you've done research for over 20 years, and like you said earlier, you discover something new all the time.
Yes, sir.
People are constantly talking about this flat earth theory, and they're using ancient Egypt as a reference, and they're saying that the ancient Egyptians viewed Nut as the sky, the dome arched over the flat earth. So they're using ancient Egypt, and they're saying that even they knew that the earth was flat. So can you talk to me about the flat earth theory?
I mean, this is sad when we get into this, especially when we have to go back to Imhotep, long before the Athenian Eratosthenes that our children are told, who gave us the circumference of the earth of 25,000 miles circumference of the earth. Now, this is Imhotep gave us the circumference of the earth by studying the winter solstice and the summer solstice, giving us the circumference of the earth at 25,000 miles circumference of the earth. So we're talking about what, flat earth? I mean, when we got all the science, okay, so this is where we're locked into this kind of the epitome of imbecility, to think that the earth is flat. Again, Chris and the boys, okay, they thought the earth was flat. I mean, well, at least Christopher Columbus, that we know Christopher Columbus thought that the world wasn't flat, that it started his sailing across the Atlantic Ocean. But again, this is all about keeping us locked into the imbecility without researching the serious knowledge that is there. To get caught up into flat earth, when these grand masters already gave us that. In fact, the whole idea of the heliocentric, okay, meaning that the sun was in the center of the solar system. Our ancestors already knew that. I'm going to show the temples and how the birth of the sun and how they aligned that with the birth of the sun at December the 25th, based off of the Hittical rising of a star called Sipil-Siptah that the Greeks call Sophis and the Romans called Ceres, that was based off of the Holy Child. The idea that to get that science was based off of a heliocentric idea, based off of circumference, not based off of a flat earth. the Western Church looked at the geocentric, that the Earth was in the center of the solar system. They didn't believe that the Earth rotated around the sun. And then people who believed that, like Galileo and Copernicus and others, and Kepler, they said they would burn them at the stake if they would take that back. So they had to recant that and say, yes, the sun rotates around the Earth. So the Western Church didn't even realize that. So here, the Grand Masters, Corey-head priests, who studied this science for countless thousands of years, and now today we're going to come up and say flat Earth. So this is sad. When we understand the whole science, anyone can understand even when you look at the curvature of the Earth, even if you fly, you see the curvature of the Earth. Now, if you're on up high and you're looking down and you're looking flat from that point, but if you're talking about the flat Earth, meaning flat like a CD disc, that is insane, brother.
I guess some people are saying it's like an infinite plane. That's what.
So again, this is kind of keep people in mystical worlds instead of the real world.
Mm-hmm.
So you're caught in mystical worlds, and all the ancient science, that's on those temples. Like I said, it took going on 4 decades for me, but there's still a lot of research that has to be done. And here we're caught up in doing a moonwalk with ancient African spiritual science, going backwards. So again, our ancestors studied this ancient science. It gave them spiritual ideas that understood, especially during this time of the year, that I'm going to show in reference to the temples and the science and how our ancestors saw the birth of the sun and how the Ankh Manu, or the holies of the ancient temple, where the sun would come directly down into the hypostyle hall. So to understand that, they had to understand the fact that the earth was not flat for them to come up with that kind of science. Okay?
Right.
So our children are told that now the whole golden ratio, again, representing the golden ratio, they say the Fibonacci and these Europeans. No, our ancestors already knew that ancient science.
Right.
The golden ratio. It's through the golden ratio and the pi that they understood the ancient science of nature itself. So again, so we get caught up for hours and hours talking about flat Earth when we got ancient science that's right in front of us, especially on the books in stone of the ancient temples and tombs that our ancestors documented for thousands of years. It's not a mystical place. It's not used to be. It's still there. It's right there in front of us. So as long as they can keep our mind somewhere else, all right, then, of course, they can still rob this knowledge, rape the land. It's like saying people looking up in the sky, or like Jomo Kenyatta said, they gave us the Bible and told us to pray, and then also looking up in the sky waiting for Jesus to come by the sweet by and by while they robbed the whole planet, and while they took all of, as Jomo Kenyatta said, while they took the land. So again, this is where we are. While we're dealing with the real realities of life, we find one mystical thing to get caught up in without realizing that this is all about a distraction as we get closer and closer to how the whole Western world built off of ancient African spiritual science, ancient African spirituality, and even the Western civilization was built off of ancient African people science. So this is the real reality of that, brother.
Okay, so Brother Kwesi, can you tell me what is that picture that everybody keeps referring to? What is it basically describing when you see Newt arched over? It's the stars above Newt.
Our ancestors use anthropomorphic images, brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean by anthropomorphic images, they use human figures to represent how they saw, whether it's looked at as the heavens, the cosmos, and why would they have an African female? That's the next question. Why would they have an African female Newt arched over the heavens?
Right.
Okay, that represented the heavens because our ancestors observed from their own empirical observation that the heaven was a feminine principle. It's based off of the birth of the SUN sun. So you see the suns and the galaxies and the stars are born out of a macro womb. Now, let's take that to the micro universe. What's the micro universe? Our mother's womb. Well, our birth started with the SON sun. So they saw it as the spiritual dialectical laws of opposites, which you see in the larger realm, you'll also see in the smaller realm. That science has been documented. So that's why she was represented as an African female, giving birth to the universe, giving birth to the cosmos. So she's arched over the heavens to represent that. You not only you see her in the tombs, you see her in the Valley of the Kings, you see our ancestors even in the sarcophagus. where they carved her in the ceiling of the lid of the sarcophagus. So when the lid's shut here, we see the Nisu, or the African king, would have to look up to that ceiling of that sarcophagus. And what is he looking at? The African goddess Nut. So he's going back to where he came from. Where did he come from? He came from a micro-universe, from his mother's womb. So this is a term that they use called Sa-Ra, meaning the son of the sun. That means the S-O-N sun and the S-U-N sun were personified as one. And he's going back into the cosmic womb. That cosmic womb is what we call the heavens today, that our ancestors called the Dwat, going back to that beginning. As Dr. Ben, in his favorite quote and the humor that he would put in for us to get clarity on many things, he said, the kingdom of heaven is between the legs of the goddess Nut. And again, now that's what Pepi II said, okay, of the 6th dynasty. Now, Pepi II said the kingdom of heaven is between the legs of the goddess Nut. Well, Dr. Ben put clarity to it for us to clearly understand that the kingdom of heaven is between the legs of the African woman. So when Pepi said between the goddess Nut, well, that's the macro womb. The micro womb would be our mother's womb, where we all came from. And she broke that water where our first baptism took place in the amnios fluid of her womb. She broke that water, and then here, this is how we are here. So our ancestors deified. There was no misogyny against the African feminine principle. There was no misogyny against the African goddess. So she was represented as the goddess Nut to represent that. Then we have Shu. You can't see air. So for us to understand it, or for the general people, the general populace to understand it, what did they do? They anthropomorphized it. They put it in human form. Then Geb was the earth, stretched out in a human form. Even when we look at Amen, that many of us say at the end of our prayers, and where the Greeks took Amen up out of Africa and they became part of the Byzantine Roman Christians, where it's passed down through the various denominations of Christianity to this very day, where people still say Amen at the end of our prayers. Well, going back to the Middle Kingdom over 4,000 years ago, Amen is represented as an anthropomorphic or human form, jet black. Now, is this what Amen looked like? No, our ancestors is bringing down to us for our understanding. But Amen represents the invisible spirit. This in all of us, the invisible spirit that permeates throughout all the universe. Now, here we see that scientists today and physicists, astrophysicists, are talking about dark matter. So here, our ancestors and physicists are also talking about invisible energy. But our ancestors said Amen represented the invisible spirit, the invisible energy is in all of us. So our ancestors already knew that. Even if you go to Timothy chapter 6, verse 16, it talks about Amen that represents the invisible spirit, where people say Amen at the end of their prayers, and even in Timothy chapter 6, verse 16, it ends with Amen. This is Amen. So the concept of God is beyond our comprehension, so people brought it, so our ancestors, the Kari heads, priests, brought it down to our human understanding. So they put it in an anthropomorphic image for us to see it. So Amen is jet black, okay, representing the invisible spirit. And the what Petri refers to as pre-dynastic period, okay, it's all one ancient dynasty, but just to give reference to the timeline, then we look at Ptah, also jet black, he's also anthropomorphized. Still monotheism, one God, depending on what period it is, just like in the Bible. At one point God is called El, another point God is called Elohim, another point God is called Yahweh, different names at different periods of time. But just to give you the idea of even in ancient Kemet, you have different names of God at different periods of time, but give you an idea that they anthropomorphized for us to understand it. So going back to your original question, even Nut, the heavens is an African female, because from the spiritual observation, the universe, the cosmos, the suns are born out of a macro womb, and they refer to that as the goddess Nut.
Wow, brother. I could tell you've been researching for years, brother.
Well, it's the books in, when you're walking through the temples of Kemet, you're walking in the book. You're in the book.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
So that's like, going through those temples is like reading 1,000 books.
Okay.
Even if you can't read the Medu Neter,
yes,
they put it so clear, okay, in the glyphs and so forth. It's very clear that you see exactly what they're saying there. And these are some of the things that I'm going to show when I show the various glyphs and showing how these spiritual principles have been corrupted into the Western version of Christianity today. And that's why it's so important for us to have this lecture at this time of the year during the time of the winter solstice and the birth of the sun and how it's corrupted into now a European Serapis. I refer to as a Serapis Jesus because this is what they created and corrupted off of our ancestors' ancient spiritual stories. And to understand that what we're looking at, and this is what we want brothers and sisters to understand, what we're looking at is a corruption of ancient African spiritual stories. That means that all these things that we see in this Christmas holiday, and the star in the east, and what's that all about? And the Holy Mother, what is that all about? This is coming up out of ancient African spiritual science. It goes back thousands of years. This is coming out of African consciousness. Okay, Europeans have not created anything. Okay, when you look to the history of ancient Kemet, the Europeans are babies. Okay, when it comes to talking about ancient Kemet, that's why it's a fear, and there's always been attack on African scholars talking about ancient Kemet that the Greeks refer to as Egypt. So this is the importance of us dealing with this because it's part of our spiritual and mental liberation out of white idolatry, the worship of white images, because of the dogma that they have locked us into, that these things were real, the Holy Mother, the European image of this white Mary and this white Jesus and things. So when someone has brainwashed you, then you got to get the brain to think. And then by doing that, the temples provide that for us. There's no place like this, Brother Rich, on the planet Earth, and walking through these temples. And not only walking through the temples, but researching the temples for many, many years. And that's one thing Dr. Ben saw, my love for the temples. So when I worked with him, I would actually take the groups out to the temples, and he would make sure that there were various reliefs that he wanted me to point out. And then when I came back to the hotel, then Dr. Ben would do a in-depth lecture on some of these reliefs that he instructed me to point out. So this is the thing I'm still doing today, taking the brothers and sisters to the temples, to the reliefs, lecturing right there at the site, not letting the European tour guides take over the program, but we're in charge of the whole thing. And now coming back myself and lecturing at the temple itself. In the hotel too. So not only lecturing in the temple, but also in the hotel, not just coming over there being looky-loos, to literally bring these temples to life. And our objective and our purpose is as our ancestors called it, a kepara, a transformation in brothers and sisters who are coming back there, that they would not be the same when they leave there. And that's the purpose of making this journey and going back to the original Tadeta land. And even those who cannot make it, by having the community, as Brother King Simon, who was put on Botany and many times my wife and I, by having lectures like this, we can come back and show brothers and sisters where we can help them equally get out of the matrix of white supremacy, and that's what we're in, especially right now where people are caught up and mesmerized by all kinds of things and running out and spending up all the money and the Christmas carols and dreaming of a white Christmas and a white baby and a white Mary and talking about the Holy Mother. This is sad. Where now we are right now. This is what they're celebrating: the birth of a white baby. Okay, and through that, it's through that deification and white idolatry. This is the white supremacy power that they have. That when you put that down into the psychic of black people. Okay, and even the world, okay, program the world that this is the birth of Jesus and this is God's son. All right, this is the empowerment that white folks got. That they are God's children, and they even got terms like the Jews, that they are chosen by God. Okay, that was equally taken out of the ancient myth of nature. Okay, Septepenra, they got chosen by God, taken out of Septepenra, chosen by God. When we look at Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepenra, Mr. Mariam, and I know some people haven't heard these names. We're more familiar with these European names that they've given us, like Billies and Willies and things of that nature. But our ancestors said Ursa Ma'at Ra, Septepenra. Okay, he's chosen by Ra. He's chosen by God. Sa-Ra, okay, the son of God. This is where the Europeans are getting these names off of these temples. These are the things that we're going to look at. Okay, Neb-Kadu, Lord King of Kings. It ends up in Revelations. So these various names that we've been indoctrinated into literally came out of the most ancient language on the planet Earth, still there on the books in stone. And we're going to have a clear analytical analysis and looking at this. As I said before, this is for people to think, okay, not to believe. We can believe in a whole lot of things. But like Dr. Ben told me back in 1973 when I saw him at Long Beach State, and even though in the political black power movement at that time, And even though the spiritual part of it was, that was missing in my life, especially when warriors were taken out by the Gestapo beast, the LAPD, and then we would end up in this church under a white Serapis Jesus, and I knew something was wrong with this picture. Here, when we are taken, shot down in the street, then we end up under a white Jesus, looking like the very enemy that in Gestapo who actually shot us down in the street. So that's when I heard Dr. Ben, and he put not only the history but the black divinity together for me back in 1973. So when I asked Doc, I said, can you prove what you're saying, what you said here today? And he said, young man, I can take you back and show you. And that's the first time someone told me that they can show me. He said, but above all, we need young people like you to go back and do the field research. So that's just a brief story on how I started my journey, and made that journey in 1981, not knowing that it would spend the rest of my life returning back to Africa, back to the northeast corner as well as other parts of Africa. So, again, the story is there, and we can see that even if we look at us as a people, here in what is now called America today, and we have to look at our Ma'afa, how we were kidnapped from the African continent. So we were stolen, we were kidnapped. So the question, Brother Rich, we got to look at that we are a stolen people. So an intelligent question to ask, what else has been stolen? If someone steals you, the next question got to be asked, what else has been stolen? And that is what we have to look at. And, of course, there are many classes. I don't come with all the answers. I don't have all the answers, all right? I'm not an egotistical maniac. This is just a small piece, all right, of the many pieces that many of us have. As Dr. Richard King, peace be upon him, who wrote his book, The African Origin of Biological Psychiatry, that we have a genetic memory bank that's lying dormant, and all of us have a piece. Your great work that you're doing, your community, we all have a piece, but we can't let what the slave mentality did to us turn us into egotistical maniacs to think that only a few people have the pieces. When it takes all of us, it's like a mirror you put up to your face, you can see your face, but if someone knocks that mirror on the ground, it shatters into many pieces. If you pick up one little tiny piece and you can only see your eye and say, I have all the answers. No, you can only see your eye. You can't see your face anymore, but it takes many of us to pick up those pieces. So this is one of the small pieces of knowledge, that has to be added to the many pieces that we all have. And the purpose and the memory bank of many of us, that we all have a genius within us once we evoke that spirit. And I'm a product of that through Dr. Ben when he unlocked my ancestral genetic memory bank. So, of course, I wanted to know, just like some of us are born and believe everything we've been told, and some of us are born and want to know that which is not being told. I fall in the latter. So that started my journey. And hopefully in this presentation, the brothers and sisters will come out, that this will evoke their spirit and to unlock that ancestral genetic memory bank, so we not get caught up into this white idolatry, and above all, where the enemy has become the deity in the spiritual subconscious of our mind. All we have to do is get up on Sunday morning and ride through the neighborhoods and see the church filled up, and 9 times out of 10, you're going to have a white Serapis Jesus up there on that wall, where the Romans who brought that image on the scene. And that's some of the things that we're going to break down as well, to show how that whole image and representation that the Romans feared, that the people would rise up their ka. That's the ancient Kemetic word that means spirit. This fundamental nature represented as 2 arms up. That the Gnostics, who were a conduit, so to say, during the time of the Byzantine Roman Christians, who were trying to keep the ancient African spiritual story alive. But it was the Romans who, in the Western European church, the Romans, the Byzantine Romans, who exterminated all of them because they were teaching the real meaning of the ka, or the Chorus, that the Romans corrupted into the Christ. That the Christ had nothing to do with any European image. It had to do with the spiritual development in all of us. And that was represented as the ka. And this is what the Romans corrupted. Not only did they corrupt it, but even today, the foundation of Western version of Christianity is based off of the physical body getting up out the ground. It had nothing to do with a physical body, but a spiritual body that they saw, that they called the ka. But the kat, that is called the mummy today, it stayed in the earth. So, again, the Romans didn't understand something they could not see, the spiritual body, the sahu body. These are some of the things that we're going to touch on as well, to show that we all using the interpretation that we understand today, are the Christ. Not no white boy, not no Serapis Jesus, but a spiritual development. And the Romans feared it because if the people understood, their spirit would rise up and fight against tyranny and oppression. So that means if we understood what the Ka, or what they was translated today as the Christ really represented, then we would rise up and fight against oppression when we're shot down in the street every day by the Gestapo police force in America. That we would rise up our spirit. So this is what was taught. And the Romans feared that. So, of course, the Gnostics, who understood that this Serapis Jesus that the Romans were creating, the Byzantine Roman Christians were creating, they said this is an antichrist. This is an anti-divine spirit that you're corrupting the whole spiritual meaning of the Christ. And you're making this image. And they took from ancient Kemet and the birth of the sun at December the 25th. It was personified as Haru. And also the Holy Mother Aset, who gave birth to the Holy Child Haru. They took that in the making of the European Mary and Jesus and made this time, December the 25th, based off of the birth of the sun, but they put the European image of that Jesus there. And that's all we have seen. We have not seen the whole solar meaning, of Ra, that our ancestors called the sun, and the helical rising of the star called Sybil Sifta. I'm going to take the European images of the nativity scene that means the birth of the sun and compare it with the cosmos to show without question what we are looking at when we look at the nativity scene of Mary with the sun behind her head. That's Virgo. And the sun at December the 25th that they put the Serapis Jesus in there, and that star in the east. We're literally looking at the cosmos that they took and anthropomorphized themselves in human images for the deification and white idolatry for people to worship them. When in fact it all came from the cosmos. That our ancestors documented this thousands of years ago when they saw that the Holy Father Asar and the Holy Mother Aset and the Holy Child Haru. This is how our ancestors saw it. Step by step, let's let the temples talk to us. You don't have to believe a thing that I'm saying. But let's go back where these temples were there thousands of years before I was born, and they'll be there thousands of years long after I am gone. And everybody has benefited from it, meaning the Western world. You have biblical archaeology teams over here still digging and plagiarizing and plundering many spiritual ideas. And I look at this sacred knowledge is the foundation of our spiritual and mental emancipation and liberation, because we're in the worst form of enslavement, as I said before, Brother Rich, and that is spiritual enslavement. And spiritual enslavement is when the enemy has become the deity, or meaning God, in the subconscious of our minds.
Indeed, brother. Well, I don't want to give him too much, brother, because you're dropping it today.
Well, we can't. Well, it's impossible because I'm talking about it, but the power of over going on 4 decades of documenting on the temples and relief, that's what we want to talk to us. That's what we're going to show. The visual documentation. After all, images shape our reality. Unfortunately, our reality has been shaped by the tail-eye vision today. Mm-hmm. So again, let brothers and sisters come out and look at the comparative analysis, mm-hmm. and let the evidence speak for itself. That's all I'm saying, to show without question we are very spiritual people. Europeans have not created any type of spirituality. They corrupted spirituality into the Western version of religion. That's what they have done. But, we are very spiritual people, and these spiritual ideas came from our ancestors countless thousands of years ago. And so, again, we're going to have a good time. I think this is a time that, especially now, that I choose to always show this lecture, to show without question, as I said before, that these ideas came from our ancestors. And so it's a great honor being on your show to talk about some of the things that we're going to talk about. So, of course, there's going to be a lot more that I'm going to show and talk about when I come this Sunday.
Indeed. Once again, family, that is December 10th. Ashra Kwesi will be in Brooklyn, New York, the Black Lady Theater, 750 Nostrand Avenue. For more information, contact King Simon at 347-496-1022. This is going to be an event y'all don't want to miss. This is a great way to bring in December and also to close out the year and to learn about our ancient scientists from this brother who's been documenting our story for over 2 decades, man. One of the first brothers to do it out there, man. I definitely appreciate you being on the show today, and I will definitely see you on December 10th, my brother.
Yes, sir, Brother Rich. Again, it's an honor to be on your show. Education for Liberation, my brother.
All right, we signing out, family. We see you next time. Peace.
Hotel.
Rich, but I came from the Nile Valley. It's bittersweet, I smile sadly. Truth rarely seen like child's daddies. I'm in Hotep, I style flashy. Regarded highly, I'm Selassie. As time is passing, tribes are clashing. I know the ledge, I grow my dreads. My queen's 2 open legs have golden eggs, I'm hatched. 9 months had to hold my breath. Now I dream so heavy that I broke the bed. Provoke the feds that slaughter the sons. 12 get the 4-5 like a quarter to 1. The war has begun. Latin for sun, the soul and melanites get more of the sun. We the fortunate ones. Got the God in the womb and the Lord in my come, and no more means love. Death is the source that I'm from. Everything that they do, we have already done. Self-taught, my ice a melt salt. Mine high price, I write and sell thought.